Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your natal black moon Lilith in the 5th house. The 5th house is the house of creativity, your love life, it's recreational sex, it's your childhood from the perspective of the inner child. This is the house of pleasure, so as it pertains to childhood, I see the fun, the games, the innocence that we associate with childhood, the creative energy. This is creativity, the house of creativity. So Black Moon Lilith can be shadow in this area, and shame that you felt that is connected to the 5th house matters, and rejection too. So suffice it to say, this can be quite painful because the person may feel rejected in love, rejected in terms of sexuality. In other words, not being the object of desire in others. I was actually reading this one site in the comments, and it was the way that these people express themselves was so well done, I thought. And somebody said, I never feel like the prize. And, that kind of thing I never thought that people would look at themselves that way. But I can understand, especially the way that society conditions us to think that, especially for women, because I believe this was a female who wrote this idea that women have to be the most desirable, to be worthy of love. Because think about what I just said. I said this is the house of your love life, but also the house of recreational sex. So those kind of things sometimes get conflated with one another, and it isn't true. They're not the same thing. Well, the 5th house is about pleasure, and that's where the sex comes in. That's one form of sex. Sex doesn't have to be just about procreation. It's interesting, though, because this is the house of procreation. And so I've made the observation in the past is why don't they have this be the house of intentional sex for procreation? Because it's got too many fun things attached to it. Instead, you know. So anyway, there's a site called elsaelsa.com that has an article on Black Moon Lilith in the 5th house. And the title of this person's article is Dark Creation. And that's referring to the 5th house and what it means in terms of creativity. I just wanted to read the first few sentences because I think that I can't paraphrase it succinctly. If you have Lilith in the 5th house of your chart, her themes will manifest in terms of sexuality, pleasure, creativity, and children. It may seem as if life's pleasures are always either denied or warped. And when I read that part, I thought that's great because I still have been trying to get a handle on the influence of Black Moon Lilith, and this is because I've gone to different websites. I've even tried to look to see if there were books on this. There's not like a lot of overt information. And when I do find it, I mean, there are things online, but they seem to focus on different things, aspects of it, and almost contradict one another. In some viewpoints, it's like the rebellious feminist influence and the theme of the woman who would not be kept down. And even for men, that idea of the feminine side that is not accepted society or something like that, the divine feminine that is suppressed, maybe. I don't even know if that's correct. But today I found a couple of sites that, to me, made it more succinct in terms of shadow work. One site simply put, this is where you need to do your shadow work, wherever you have Lilith in your chart. And so for people with it in the fifth house, it's going to relate to the innocence of childhood. And see, the fourth house is childhood, the home environment, the family of origin. The fifth house is the spirit of the child, I would say. So that's where the creativity, if you look at children, they're naturally creative. You don't have to tell a child to scribble or draw a picture. They will do that naturally. Very inventive, just shows that creativity is inherent in human beings. And even with sexuality, it's the innocent version of it that isn't perverted, that isn't tainted in some way. This is the house of conceiving children. So it's bringing children into the world, children themselves, and love, but love for the sake of love. This being the house of pleasure, it's not an obligation. The seventh house has a contract, a ring. It's, now that I think about it, the seventh house of committed partnership is also the house of legal affairs. So those two can go hand in hand if you get legally married. But the fifth house is doing something for the joy of it. And Lilith might bring darkness to a situation that a person didn't feel like they could be creative. And maybe that has followed them into adulthood. I read a comment on, I think it was elsa.com, about someone saying that they were introduced to some sexual material from the parents at a young age. So that is a corrupting force. And those kinds of things. I think it has like a Plutonian influence in general. So people who have Lilith in the fifth house, it could be something where they feel that their childhood was lost when it comes to issues of innocence and the ability to create, and how that can manifest in adult situations is if you have had some kind of history with sexual abuse, how can you learn to trust? How can you learn to love? How can you learn how to feel innocent and get your I wouldn't say get your childhood back, because you can't replicate that as an adult, but still feel an innocence within yourself. Still feel a certain sense of there's good in the world. There are people that are going to love me for myself. They're not going to use me. That I can experience pleasure. I don't have to reject it out of hand because of traumatic experiences. Actually, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about the second chakra, because I think that is kind of connected to the fifth house. I don't know if if there are any books that, say that point blank. But the second chakra is one of the lower chakras, so that's that's going to be concerning a lot of mundane matters. The first chakra is the chakra of safety, security, just the basic needs. And the second chakra, it's like you get those basic needs taken care of, and then you can think about pleasure. It can be also the chakra of emotions, but I think it's connected to the sex organs, and it can be giving, children having, giving birth. I'm sure it's reproductive issues and sexuality, but also creativity. So any of the chakras can become imbalanced. And that's kind of what I would see with Lilith, is that there might be some imbalance. The woman who feels shamed, maybe through religion or whatever, maybe ancestral trauma, about being sexual, and remember also in childhood, maybe shamed in childhood for exploring their sexuality. That could have been completely innocent. And that repression. Any kind of rejection, and this can involve love itself, feeling unloved. But in terms of sex in particular, sometimes this is reacted to in terms of promiscuity. And I was thinking about this in terms of men or boys. Sometimes you may have a father who pushes the son to be like kind of somebody who's a conquest, or what do they call it? Somebody who is looking at women as conquests, or girls, you could say. And, pushing them into dating at an early age and asking inappropriate questions. And that can shut down that young man's sexuality because his father is being too invasive and maybe even trying to live vicariously through his son. So I just want to point out that there's a site that I often go to that I find very helpful called advancedastrology.com, and they call Black Moon Lilith a demonic, they say it's named after a demonic female figure. So it's not supposed to be some kind of a heroine, I guess. So that's pretty shocking. I don't know if there are some women who identify or think that this is some kind of a heroine. And okay, so another thing and they're mentioning this. So I would imagine losing your childhood in an early age. I could see that also with somebody's chart with Saturn here, in particular, maybe Pluto. But if a child has to grow up really quickly for some reason, that might be where they lose their childhood. Now, of course, it could be some kind of traumatic event. I would say even the death of a parent, where fun is over with because something bad has happened. And then what happens? You become afraid to seek pleasure, seek fun, because maybe you were shamed out of it at some point. Or maybe it just starts from day one, because let's say the parents are part of some kind of religious organization that thinks that pleasure is sinful or whatever. And you're supposed to, life is about hard work and play is frivolous. That kind of thing can be very hard to transcend as an adult because it's so deeply ingrained in you as a child. And again, remember that this can go in two directions. It can either continue to be suppressed out of feelings of shame and guilt, or the person can rebel wildly and they can, become something of a hedonist with the fifth house. This is one of the houses of addiction. And we can talk about what causes addiction. But that might be one of the placements of somebody who becomes indiscriminate in choosing pleasure because they were suppressed so long. It's like they had to make up for lost time or what have you. The thing I'm discovering about Lilith is that it's extreme. And actually, I think that was when I was making the connection with Pluto, because I get the same kind of vibe from that, you know. And some things to watch out for are confusing love with sex. And so feeling that if you're having a sexual relationship, that you are being loved, that you are being accepted by that other person instead of being used. And you can tell if you have a relationship where somebody is using you if that person doesn't show interest in you outside of the bedroom, if they don't want to do things with you. And people tend to be pretty perceptive, and they will know deep down inside if they are being used. But they may compulsively continue to go into this direction, almost like a self-destructive trait. So what'll happen is that it will increase that amount of feeling rejected by continuing to engage in that type of one-dimensional activity. Being very selective with people that you form a love bond with is very important as well, because this could indicate choosing unwisely in love and then creating that pain for yourself. So, not creating drama in your life through picking partners who are very destructive themselves and turn your life upside down. That's very important. Doing any kind of healing around the issue of children, having an abortion. Recently in America, we've had abortion rights come up as something of a concern. And one thing to understand is that it doesn't matter what a person's views are on abortion. Even if you have the most liberal viewpoint on abortion, if you are only looking at the positive aspects of the issue of abortion, that is not a balanced position, because some people do experience trauma after having an abortion that has nothing to do with their religious beliefs, their, whether it's legal or not, their political affiliation. And by just presenting this rosy one-sided view, it can just create more of the same. You have to look at things in a balanced way, not in an extreme way, because that just leads people down a path that they don't realize how it's going to affect them later on. When I talk about innocence in these contexts and about forgiving the self, I'm talking about not seeing the self as having done something malicious, but seeing exactly why you did what you did. And that can extend to other people as well. As a matter of fact, that's what forgiveness is all about, is not framing something that someone else did as malicious, even if it came across that way. And of course, sometimes somebody may have done something deliberately cruel. I'm not saying that we should just kind of like gloss over that, but I'm talking about in certain circumstances, when we find it hard to forgive ourselves or other people, it might be because we're not looking at it from the perspective of innocence. and that desire for love, whatever else that is going on with that. So inner child work is something that the fifth house may require in order to deal with this. There is a book by, her last name is Judith. It should be, you'd think it would be her first name, but her last name is Judith, and she has written classics on the chakra system. So I would definitely check out her books. One of them is called the Wheels of Life, I think. I think that's her first one. And you can look at the second chakra, and it might give exercises about the inner child as it pertains to creativity, but also sexuality. I don't know, but it definitely is a very important resource for the energetic system. And I think it could have it could be quite relevant to this particular discussion. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.